Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back into the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and today I've got 5 must-start wide receivers for Week 7 fantasy football action. I've also posted my 5 must-start running backs for Week 7 here as well, so make sure to go check out that video after you finish watching this one here, and click that subscribe button if you're new around here so you can check out all of the daily fantasy content that we've got posted for this week. But as I talked about in that running backs episode, we've got bye weeks again here in Week 7. This is going to be something we're dealing with for basically the majority of the remaining fantasy football season. Basically, after we get into Week 1 of the fantasy football playoffs, we'll finally be done with these. But going forward here, every single week, we're going to be somewhat limited in the options we have to choose from to head into our lineup. So it's very critical we make good choices here and put the right guys in to start on a week-to-week basis. And that's what I'm here to help you guys do. If you've got questions for me, drop those in the comment section below, and I'll help get back to as many of you as possible before the kickoff for Sunday afternoon's games. With that being said, we're not going to waste any more time. Let's hit that intro and get straight in to our first must-start wide receiver for Week 7. All right, one more quick note before we jump into today's first player. Today's episode is brought to you by ThriveFantasy.com, which is either a website or fantasy app that allows you to play prop betting styles of daily fantasy sports this NFL season. When signing up as a new user, use promo code SIZZLE when depositing $10 or more all the way up to $100, and you'll get yourself an instant match bonus when becoming, again, a new member on their site. That's promo code SIZZLE, SIZZLE. Go check them out. I'll be posting later in the week my lineup for Thursday night's game, and I'll give you guys a little bit of an insight into my thoughts for that performance. And every week we'll have a couple of short segments regarding Thrive and their various lineups, tools, settings, gameplay formats, all that great stuff. So, with that being said, Courtland Sutton here is my first must-start wide receiver for Week 7 action. In a short week, Denver taking on Cleveland. First of all, how about Courtland Sutton's production over the last 2 weeks? He has started to look more and more like himself. If you remember back to that 2019 season when he really started to produce as the wide receiver 1 for this Denver Broncos offense and looked like a true alpha for this football team, he obviously had the season-ending knee injury last year, knocked him out of games, and he had some boom-bust production to start this season, but I think he's now really starting to reassert himself as a dominant force in this offense. And again, being someone this tall, this physically gifted, as athletic as him in the red zone to be able to go up, make jump ball, contested catches for touchdowns. Courtland Sutton's the complete package here. He's got some very underrated route running as well. Again, short week here, taking on Cleveland. This is an injury-decimated team, and to begin with, their cornerbacks are susceptible to losing 50-50 balls, and Courtland Sutton's the receiver that tends to win the majority of those. I think that just heading into this game, we're still looking like Jerry Jeudy's not going to be available. Sleeper Fantasy, which is where I play a lot of my fantasy football this season, put out a report from a Denver Broncos beat that Jerry Jeudy is under 50% to play here on Thursday night. So although he was designated to return from the injury reserve list, it sounds like we're going to be without him for at least this week as well. That's just better news for Courtland Sutton here because he can beat even Cleveland's top corners depending on who's healthy and available to go out there and even start for them because they've had some injury liabilities in their secondary this season. Courtland's still a guy that can come out here and produce. So the last 2 weeks this season, we've seen Courtland have 19 or more fantasy points in back-to-back performances. And you're talking about the Chargers and the Cardinals, who absolutely destroyed and shredded this secondary, whether it was Mike Williams for Justin Herbert's football team and the Chargers taking on that Cleveland defense and just baking them to shreds, or if it was last week where we saw the Cardinals with A.J. Green and DeAndre Hopkins. D-Hop literally had 4 targets and he scored 2 touchdowns, just simply out-talenting the players that were covering him. So Courtland's a player I love this week. He's very, very impressive, again, in terms of that recovery and reascending himself into that wide receiver 1 spotlight for this football team. This is a matchup and a player whose stock is currently on the rise and you want to have around on your roster. That might change a little bit once Jerry Jeudy gets back into the mix here, but for right now, he's a very, very strong lineup play. Speak of the devil, A.J. Green here. Arizona taking on the Houston Texans. This is a simple talent mismatch. Across the board, the 4 wide receivers that line up in this air raid Arizona Cardinals offensive system, they're just better than the 4 defensive backs that Houston can line up to cover them. A.J. Green has stepped up to the plate here. inserted himself and really established himself as the number 2 wide receiver option for this football team, and he looks even more and more legit and back to his former self. Now, he's clearly not in his prime anymore. He's on the downtrend for his NFL career and obviously his playing, his NFL mortality here. But AJ is still a serviceable player, and in terms of consistency and value to lineups as a flex play, he's got 4 out of his 6 weeks this season with 11.5 or more fantasy points. He's finding the end zone, winning some nice catches, or winning some nice routes, and obviously turning into those into some nice catches. Green's a player with a quarterback of Kyler Murray's talent. He can come out, put up another productive game in a good matchup here, and find a way to produce for us. Again, you're looking at him more as a flex option here, but still a player who's not a number 1 for his football team that I think has a lot of value for lineups here in Week 7. DJ Moore. If some of you are getting a little bit down on DJ Moore after the past 2 down performances, quote unquote, here for him, don't be. Do not panic with DJ Moore. Stay perfectly comfortable. Don't sell him. Don't do any of that fun stuff. Keep him put in your lineups. He's going to be just fine. DJ Moore taking on the New York Giants this week has got a matchup against the Giants, who have been really struggling to guard receivers so far this season. Their defense has wildly underproduced, and they've been basically an utter disappointment. This was one of the top defensive units in the league to end last season. They were playing hot football at the end of 2020, and this year has been a complete flip of the script. Joe Judge's team looks lost. They got absolutely hammered. Now they are very injured. They're very banged up, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But the defensive pieces have just not put it together this year, and they have been really lackluster to kick off this 2021 season. And as we approach the halfway marker of the year, it's looking like this is going to continue to be the trend for the rest of this season. Again, going back to DJ Moore, back-to-back down performances, and especially this past week was a little bit more eye-opening. He had 13 targets and only 5 catches. This was more of a product of Sam Darnold's inaccuracy, a couple of drop balls from DJ Moore, which were borderline drops. They weren't blatant or anything of that sort. And just the fact that they were on the same page. Clearly the Panthers, who somehow got that game to overtime, were not playing clean football, were not playing their best brand of offensive Carolina football offense, especially up to Matt Rule's standards here. And that's kind of what led to, again, only 5 receptions on those 13 targets, catching under half of the footballs thrown his way this past week. So if DJ Moore can get back out here and produce against this Giants team that has surrendered in just the last 2 weeks 4 quality lineup plays at the wide receiver position. I'm talking CeeDee Lamb, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, and Amari Cooper. Now, these are very talented players, but so is DJ Moore, who is unquestionably the number 1 pass-catching target in this offense without Christian McCaffrey on the field. So he's going to get his looks. Sam Darnold almost forces him the football, and it's almost a bad thing for this football team, but a great thing for DJ Moore's fantasy value. He's going to bounce back here. I expect him to come out. He could even hit a long ball in this game because those defensive backs for the Giants have been underproducing lately. This is one that could be a potential boom game for a very talented player in DJ Moore. Terry McLaurin taking on my Green Bay Packers this week. You see it, other side, on the quarter zip here that I'm wearing today. My secondary is in shambles right now. This is the time to take advantage of us. If the Chicago Bears offense had any sort of a reliable passing game and any structure to the way they were doing things, Allen Robinson and Darnell Mooney should have had ridiculous boom games last week. Simply holding the football too long, not seeing open receivers downfield. Allen Robinson should have scored like a 60-yard touchdown, but Justin Fields literally stared him down and just never threw the ball and took a sack. It was very mind-boggling to me. Those 2 players should have had a lot more fantasy points than they did last week. There was very many missed opportunities for that offense. And it's not to say that the Washington football team is immune to those mistakes, because clearly that's what's eaten into Terry McLaurin's value the last 2 weeks here. But just like DJ Moore, who's been underproductive the last 2 games, as has Terry McLaurin, he's got 19 targets in the last 2 weeks combined. So you're looking at another clear number 1 option in his offense, one of the best route runners in the league, super athletic, very great at stretching the field, super explosive, and can make those downfield grabs and blow past the defense. Jair Alexander's banged up. Kevin King's been missing games, although for all we know, if you're a real NFL fan and tune into secondaries, you know the jokes and the memes about how bad Kevin King is. That might actually hinder Terry McLaurin's ceiling this week. Some Packers slander for my own team there. But Terry McLaurin has every opportunity. The last time these two teams played, he absolutely ate the Packers alive with Jair Alexander on the field. He should come out here and just be uber productive. He's getting the looks, the opportunities. He just hasn't been on the same page with his quarterback. And this is a situation where, again, just like DJ Moore, if you're starting to lose faith and confidence in this passing offense, in McLaurin's ability to be a productive wideout, don't be. His ceiling is sky high. I had this in his pre-draft profile. There's going to be some ugly bust games this year, but the booms, the ceilings, the heights he can get to are very, very elite, and that's something you absolutely want to be a part of if you've got him on your roster. So do not sit down Terry McLaurin this week. Keep him in those starting lineups. He is a must-start player for me, again, against a very weakened Packers secondary dealing with a lot of injuries and starting players out there who, to be quite honest, should not be. We were starting Rasul Douglas last week, who we picked up off the streets in the middle of the week, so that just kind of tells you what's going on in that Green Bay back end. And then Jaylen Waddle taking on the Atlanta Falcons this week. The number one thing that contributes to this here is the fact that Tua's back in this offense. He and Jaylen Waddle have a very clear chemistry and connectivity that has shown and been very obvious in their starts together so far this season. His two most productive games in the lineup in which he's actually scored touchdowns came when Tua Tagovailoa was under center for the Dolphins. His numbers dipped a little bit when Jacoby Brissett was in the game, and he wasn't having as quite of a productive performance as when Tua has been at the helm, although it be a short sample size, or a small sample size to this point in the season. Jaylen Waddle is a player who, unfortunately, the Dolphins can't really tap into his elite ceiling value because for as good of a deep route runner he is and as explosive as he is as an athlete, Tua's not passing the ball downfield enough. But what he is doing that I did not expect Jaylen Waddle to do here is have double-digit target games and have games in which he just hauls in a massive reception total. 10 receptions on 13 targets this past week in London against the Jaguars for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's the big kicker here. This is the player that Tua trusts with the football down in the red zone. Obviously, he's got big bodies like Mike Gesicki to throw the football to, and there's injuries at the wide receiver position, which is lightening up the competition that Jaylen Waddle has for targets here. But for now, he's just throwing quick hitters out in the flat on bubble routes, smoke screens, any short hitch pattern, whatever the case might be. Waddle is finding quick ways to separate and just stick the ball out and score 6. That's how he's getting his work done here. This is a weaker Falcons secondary. They're much improved from last season, but they're still very susceptible. Again, Waddle hasn't even tapped into that deep passing game yet. He hasn't really hit one explosive play over the top of a defense where he's had that signature play from like in Alabama back in his college days when he would just run past everyone in the secondary because his quarterback doesn't quite have the arm to get him the football there or really have the confidence at the NFL level to make those tight window throws. So Waddle's got a lot of ceiling potential to capitalize on and tap into here. And if he continues to now keep an eye open for the injury report here and see how that Dolphins wide receiver core is coming together in the injury department, we might see Devontae Parker back in the lineup here and putting up some decent numbers and obviously taking a part of that work share. But for now, the more opportunities Jaylen Waddle has, the higher his floor creeps. And with a player of his talent, his run after catch ability, and just the caliber of an athlete he is, he's got a quite good ceiling as well. Alrighty, those are my 5 must-start wide receivers for Week 7 action. Again, presented to you by ThriveFantasy.com. Deposit $10 or more all the way up to $100 and get that instant deposit match when you use promo code SIZZLE. That's SIZZLE for this NFL season. Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's video. Remember, if you've got questions, I'll try and get back to as many of you as possible. So drop those lineup questions for your teams in the comment section below and go check out some of the other videos that we've posted for Week 7 fantasy football action to this point. And I'll see you guys there. Peace out.